what I do, what I do, da da do, da da do. All right, here we go. Hi guys. Today I'm here with Lindsey Kennedy. Hi, Lindsey.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
Yeah, great, thanks.
Awesome. So Lindsey is one of our all-time favorite freelance writers. And we've been working together for like, I don't know, 6, 7 years, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, God, 6 years.
Yeah. And she's definitely by far one of the most talented content and copywriters I know, especially when it comes to tech. And that's because, well, I think it's because she's an incredible creative and talented storyteller on the one hand, but she also has this innate ability to grasp even the most complex data and tech-related concepts. And the combination of these two skills mean that she has this incredible ability to do what we like to call humanizing the tech and turning super boring, complex text concepts into intriguing and compelling articles and copy that people actually want to read. And that's why I thought it would be great for us to have this little chat today so that Lindsey can share some of her wisdom with you guys and tell you a little bit about the process of tech writing and also a little bit about herself. So let's get going. Lindsey, do you want to start by telling us a little bit about your journey into copywriting? How did you come about it? How it all unfolded?
Yeah, sure. So I did English lit as my undergrad, and I'd always been involved in things like like amateur film writing and playwriting and that kind of thing. So I was always involved in different types of writing, and then after uni, pretty much every job I was in, I ended up being sort of involved in making things like marketing materials.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but right before I sort of moved into copywriting, I'd been working for a corporate video company, and we had a lot of tech clients. And so a lot of my job was writing scripts for their videos. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd be sort of, taking things that were often quite dry and trying to turn them into scripts that would be engaging on screen. And I just found that really, really interesting. I really liked that challenge. So then when I started getting more involved in journalism, it was like a natural fit to look at copywriting as well.
Yeah, cool. So obviously, we all know that you specialize in tech. What was it about tech? I know you kind of just told us a little bit about it, but what was it about tech that grabs your interest still till today?
I think it's just that I think that when you're writing about tech, what you're really doing is asking the person reading to imagine kind of what life could be like in a year or
Mhm.
5 to 10 years. And I think that's just innately interesting. I
Yeah.
think it's a really interesting challenge to try and make people get excited about things that haven't happened yet.
Yeah, I completely agree. And especially the kind of stuff that we've been writing for different clients, whether it's about data and about privacy and how things are going to look in the future, um, or if it's about, virtual reality or augmented reality. Yeah, I agree. I think it's super cool. Yeah, just nerding out,
Great.
nerding out over it. Um, So obviously, I think that while it's really, really interesting, as we just said, and kind of imagining how things can look in the future, it also means that you need to reimagine things that might not be there yet.
Mhm.
So what do you think are the main challenges with tech writing,
I,
whether it's related to the actual content of what we're talking about, or just how you approach writing it?
yeah, so I think the big challenge is, like you said there, is trying to get people to picture something they've not seen yet. I think that it's difficult to find ways of like analogies that you could use or comparisons that you could use that fit right without making, on one hand, the new thing sound like an old thing, but also without sort of overstraining that metaphor or over promising what that tech can do. So I think it's just like trying to get people excited about, and also a lot of people are nervous when they don't understand something. A lot of people don't want to tell you that they don't understand something.
Yeah.
Um, so you've got to find ways to make that engaging and interesting, and exciting for that person without sort of just throwing loads of new information at them that might be overwhelming.
Yeah, and I think one really compelling way that you do it is you a lot of the times I notice that you start an article with kind of like a personal story, which is a metaphor for the actual tech you're going to be talking about, but you're bringing it really back into the world that we're living in today.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's really important. I think framing any new idea in the context of things people already understand is really important, and it just takes out that fear at the beginning of of reading the article for that person.
So how would you say that writing for tech and for tech companies in general, which is usually much more B2B, and your audience is usually kind of, engineers and developers, how would you say that's, when it comes to the writing itself, how would you say that differs to writing for B2C companies, which is business to client?
Yeah, so I think the difference is that when you're writing for B2C, you're often sort of getting someone, you're playing on someone's sort of self-image and like what kind of person they could be, right? Whereas with B2B, it's more a sense of like what sort of like distinct benefits this is going to bring them. So people are much more critical about about like how this is going to benefit them. They want very specific examples. It's not just I'm going to be this kind of person, or this is how I'm going to, how it fits in with my image. Having said that, I think that one thing that often gets overlooked is that even when you are selling B2B stuff, that person is still imagining themselves as a human being. They still want to get excited about maybe how they fit in with their company, how they're going to impress their boss by bringing in this new idea, or where their company could go, or whether their company could be the next Airbnb, or whatever the thing is. So in that sense, you are still thinking about them with a little bit of that B2C hat on, really, of how they're looking at themselves.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that even more than that, when you write for B2B, a lot of people have this conception that because we're writing for developers or engineers or suits or whatever, then we have to write super boring, super dry things because that's what they expect. And that's how it's always been like. And we ignore the fact that these people go home and watch Netflix and have jokes with their friends and have a pint, just like all of us do.
Yeah. And also they've got enough boring stuff to read today. If you want to
Exactly.
stand out, you need to be the bit that's not boring.
Completely. I think that this is like an ongoing struggle which we have with almost every techie B2B client we have. When we try to convince them that they need that extra oomph, that people will continue reading only if they finding it intriguing and interesting. Otherwise, they're just not going to read it. So you can write all this amazing stuff, but at the end of the day, if you want someone, even if they're a developer sitting alone at home and they don't really like going out and seeing other people, they still want to read interesting stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
I actually had, I think one of the biggest examples was a few weeks ago. We were writing a one-pager for a new startup. And we infused it with a bit of storytelling, and a bit of like choppy copy, like starting sentences with and but and breaking all the rules and all that. And the feedback we got was we really enjoyed reading it, but we're supposed to, our target audience are suits and executives, and they literally, the feedback was, don't you think it's too interesting? I'm like, are you serious?
Oh God.
No, it can't be. Even though they're suits, they get all these one pages from startups and they're all super boring. They're all about the dry facts. Make it a bit interesting and you can stand out.
I think as a rule of thumb, the way to picture it when you're writing this stuff is you're talking to someone you really respect professionally. You're talking to someone like maybe a boss or someone you'd love to work with, but you're talking to them in the pub. So I
Yeah,
think
exactly.
to get, so you need to come across well. You need to show how much you know and you understand the world, but you're talking to them on a level.
Yeah, definitely. Keeping it real.
Yeah.
I completely agree. So back to tech copy. What would be kind of your top tips for approaching a tech writing gig?
So I think the biggest thing is to not be afraid to ask questions, because you almost certainly, if it's new especially, you're not going to understand everything about this, that because it's new, right? So the worst thing you can do is go through an entire conversation with a client, or get through writing an entire article, and then realize, the whole time you don't really understand something about this. Because if you don't understand it, the audience for it's not going to understand it either. And it's much better to feel like a bit of an idiot and ask an obvious question than to have the embarrassment 2 weeks later of admitting after you've written something that you didn't quite grasp that one part of the technology. I think that's the absolute most important thing.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that even even from the point of view of sending it over to the client, and then the client saying that actually you didn't really grasp the concept, and then they might start being worried that as a copywriter you're not quite there and you can't really grasp it, when actually you could if you only asked the
Yeah,
right questions.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I completely agree. I know we maybe touched on a few of these a couple of minutes ago, but what do you think are the biggest mistakes that tech companies make when it comes to their copy?
Definitely being too attached to jargon. No one likes
Mhm.
jargon. No one in the industry likes jargon. Like, obviously, there's a balance that you have to use enough of the language that people use in that industry, um, to fit in with that. But like, no one likes jargon. No one likes convoluted sentences. No one likes really dry copy. And I think a lot of companies, they're just nervous because, like, as you kind of said before, they're nervous that they're not going to come across right to their client base. But that's just not the case. People want to be spoken to in an interesting and engaging way, whatever the subject matter. I think that's the absolute most important thing.
Yeah, and I think that with jargon as well, what ends up happening is that all these companies use the exact same jargon and the exact same words, and then it comes off something like, "We offer best-in-class tech solutions." And I think the worst is when we get a new lead coming to the agency, and I start looking through their website trying to understand what it is that they do, but I can't.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
like, I don't, I literally can't understand what you guys do. And I think that's a lot because of jargon, and because of I think it's because it's the gap, we call it the gap of knowledge,
Mhm.
when you're sure that because you know something really, really well, then everyone else does.
Yeah.
So you say something like innovative technologies, and to you and to your team, it's obvious what you mean by innovative technologies because you've just spent 5 years developing them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for the person on the other end, I'm like, I have no clue. And not only do I have no clue, I've just seen 6 different websites saying the exact same thing.
Absolutely, yeah. And also, like, you're not selling to other people on your team. You're selling to someone who's not used your stuff before, so you need
Yes.
to, like, just, yeah, break out of that headspace a little bit and talk to people in their language, not yours sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, and make your unique selling point unique
Yeah.
and clear
Yes,
right off
absolutely.
the bat. Yeah, I completely agree. Um, so I think this is a really interesting next question, and I think you do it really, really well. What do you think is the role of storytelling within tech copy? Does it even have a place?
Yeah, absolutely has a place. I mean, tech companies, I sort of touched on this right at the beginning, but like, tech companies are trying to sell an alternative way of being, right? They're trying to sell a better future for the world, or for their, their industry, or for whatever space they're in. They're trying to sell people more successful companies. They're trying to sell people different ways of being in their team, and those are stories that they're selling. They just don't really think of it in that way. But
Mhm.
people don't get excited about fixing a small problem. They get excited about being good at their job. They get excited about being promoted or being seen as an expert in their field, or, like I said before, like being the next Airbnb or Netflix. So you need to sell them on that story and figure out how the technology gets them to the end of that story that they want. um, and that's why storytelling is just so absolutely essential, especially in tech writing, because people don't understand it as much.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm gonna throw a whammy question your way, an unplanned one. You know how, well, I said a little bit about it before. When you start, a lot of the articles that you write, you kind of give this example from everyday life that you then connect to the technology.
Yeah.
How do you do that? How do you come up with those examples? Do you have
Um,
any tips to share with us?
I whenever I get something through, like a topic through, before I start writing it, I imagine myself explaining it to my nan, like who's like who's in her 80s, and yeah, so I try and imagine myself explaining it to her with like her complete lack of knowledge of anything in this, and I'm like, she doesn't know anything about technology. She struggles with a mobile phone, right? So I'm like, if I was explaining to her what the point is of this existing, like how would I do that? And then when you start doing that, you start thinking of like different types of metaphor or analogy, or like really, really, really simple ones. And then you work back from there and think about how that they could be, how you make them slightly more sophisticated for this particular tech audience, but so you still retain the same level of simplicity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, wow, I think that's an incredible tip. Just imagine like you're trying to explain it to your nan.
Yeah.
That's great. I love it. I love it. Make a note of it, guys, because that's a really good one. um, so let's say you now got a new tech project coming in. Um, what do you think writers, and especially new writers starting out, what do you think they should really bear in mind during the briefing process? Is there anything they need to pay extra attention to as compared to other less techy gigs?
Yeah, I mean, definitely before you go into any conversation, just read up a little bit of what else there is in that space. Like, try and read a few articles on the topic, not on the company, but on the general topics that they cover, the general areas they cover, just so you understand what kind of questions to ask. Um, but I think that, yeah, the really big thing is just asking lots and lots and lots of questions and making sure you completely understand it, and also making sure you completely understand who their audience is. So
Mhm.
you need to be asking them who is reading this, like, and what and why, and where it fits in with their general kind of marketing plan. Because unless you know, yeah, unless you know who you're writing for, you can't really pitch that right.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point because when it comes to tech writing and a lot of the clients we work with as well, as you know, sometimes we will write articles which are meant for, let's say, either the general public
Mm-hmm.
or people who are in decision-making positions, so CEOs or CMOs, senior marketing executives, etc. But sometimes we'll, and in that case, we'll probably really need to humanize the tech and explain exactly how things work and use many more metaphors and make it really simple. But then on the other hand, sometimes we write for engineers and developers,
Yeah.
and in that case, we need to make sure that we come across as if we really know our stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You need to know how much knowledge you can assume as well on someone's part. Like, if you throw in a word like AI, do you then need to explain that term before you move on? That kind of thing. It's just tiny things like that that make the reader feel like it's for them or not for them. I think it's really important.
Yeah, exactly. And going back to what you said about asking questions, I think that's so important. Even if you feel like you might look a bit silly, make sure to ask the questions to the client and make sure to do it as quickly as possible in the process. So not on the day of the deadline, try and ask them questions because then it seems like you haven't understood it in advance.
Yeah.
So I would say when you get the brief, have a little look, make sure you understand the technology,
Yeah.
ask any questions you have, and then start writing. And then obviously you can always ask questions, but at least that very basic understanding, make sure you have it as soon as you get the brief. Would you agree?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I also think that more than any other type of business, when you're more geeky and niche the tech, the more you kind of want to push to have a conversation on the phone,
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise you'll have these people who aren't used to speaking to marketing people, especially writing incredibly convoluted techie responses. Whereas if you ask them on the phone, you naturally have to explain it in a real life conversational way. And if you listen to that, the way that they're describing it, you can start thinking about how you can put that into your own article.
Definitely. That's a great advice. Get them on the phone, guys. Even if it feels a bit uncomfortable, try and get them on the phone. That's super important. So I think we've come to our last question, which is a bit different, and it kind of takes us away a little bit from tech and from copywriting, maybe in general in that sense. But I know that in addition to freelance copywriting, you still work as a journalist. You produce documentaries, you direct plays. You're now about to write your dissertation. And I know that quite a few of our learners are also looking at freelancing as a way of freelance writing, as a way to support their own passions. Mm-hmm. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you managed to combine it?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of
all of it.
Yeah, copywriting is perfect to fit into any other passions you have, especially other writing passions, because you can be doing it from anywhere. Like, I mean, I'm in Scotland right now because I'm doing my master's in Glasgow, but in the time that I've known you, we've had conversations. I've been like, oh, I'm in the Cambodian jungle, in Mongolia, or I'm like, in weird places, or I'm about to get on a plane. Sorry, I gotta get you in an hour, and it's just the most perfect. It's the most perfect career to have to fit with being wherever you want to be in the world, because so long as you have a stable internet connection, you really can just be absolutely anywhere. But the caveat to that is that you do need to be constantly thinking about your Wi-Fi connection everywhere you go. So when I land somewhere new now, the first thing I'll do while I'm still in the airport is buy the cheapest local phone or SIM card I can, so that I've always got 3 or 4G coverage wherever I am. So if I'm on a long distance bus or something, I can be connecting to it. I think you need to try and be a bit organized about balancing all of this stuff so that you don't miss deadlines and let people down. But yeah, if you're relatively good at organizing your life and you're able to get internet wherever you are, it's just the perfect career to take on the road, really.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, we've had conversations, we've had work done for clients when we were on track to Machu Picchu and you are in Cambodia, and it's just like
I know. Oh, and the other thing though as well, in a kind of really practical way, is that if you take on copywriting jobs in areas that you're interested in, they feed into other projects you're working on, because you're constantly researching and being interested in the subject. So I've pitched stories about kind of major hacks, for example, like computer hacks, because I've been more interested in computer security while I've been writing about it, and I've pitched those stories to other newspapers because it's got me thinking about it and that kind of thing. So I think, and I'm really interested in AI. I'm really interested in data science and where that's going, and a lot of that is because I write for those tech clients. So I think you don't have to compartmentalize completely. You can think about how all the ideas and research you're looking at in copywriting might feed into the other things you're interested in as well.
Definitely. And I think that when you have all these experiences outside of copywriting, then when you come to think about how will I explain this to my nan kind of thing, and thinking about the storytelling part, you have many more interesting stories to draw from as well.
Yeah, it's a really good point.
Cool. Thank you so much, Lindsey. I think this was great. I think we got some really, really good tips in there, especially think about trying to explain to your nan. Make sure you have a good Wi-Fi connection, and always find out who you're writing for. I think those are the main 3 things which are great, and I think our learners can really take those forward. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
It's been great. Bye. Cheers. Bye.